They told you America was a democracy, that your voice mattered, that your vote counted, that your government served the people. But what if I told you none of that was ever fully true? What if I told you that over a century ago a deal was made, not in the open, not on the House floor, but behind locked doors on a secluded island? A deal so secretive, so deceptive, that it sold out the American people for generations to come, not with guns or armies, but with pens and paper, with debt and deception. This deal didn't just shift the direction of the nation. It fundamentally rewrote who holds the power in America, not the president, not Congress, not the people, but private bankers. And they've owned the game ever since. This is the story of America's greatest betrayal, the deal that sold out its people, and the hidden empire that still controls your future today. It begins in 1910. Off the southeastern coast of Georgia lies a quiet, wooded place called Jekyll Island. To most, it was just an exclusive retreat for the ultra-wealthy. But one cold November night, it became the stage for a political and financial coup so profound, it would change the destiny of the United States. 7 men boarded a private train under false names. Among them Senator Nelson Aldrich, business partner of the Rockefellers and father-in-law to John D. Rockefeller, Jr. There was Paul Warburg, representing European banking dynasties, Charles Norton of the Morgan banking interests, Benjamin Strong of Bankers Trust, and others with deep ties to Wall Street, to the Treasury, to America's emerging elite. Their mission: to design a new financial system, one that looked democratic on the surface, but gave near total control to the very institutions they represented. What they created became the Federal Reserve System. Congress passed the Federal Reserve Act in 1913, just days before Christmas, when many lawmakers were absent. It was sold to the American people as a way to stabilize the economy and prevent panics. But that was a lie, because hidden within the fine print was the surrender of America's most vital power, the power to create and control its own money. Up until then, only Congress had the constitutional authority to issue currency. But the Federal Reserve Act handed that power over to a consortium of private banks, a central bank, that was neither truly federal nor held any reserves. Despite the name, the Federal Reserve is a privately owned entity. It's not controlled by the president. It doesn't answer to voters. Its decisions aren't subject to direct oversight. And yet, it dictates interest rates, inflation, employment, and economic stability. And who profits when the Fed creates money? Not the American people, but the very banks that own stock in the Federal Reserve System. Here's how the scam works. When the U.S. government needs money, whether to fund wars, bail out banks, or cover budget deficits, it doesn't print it directly. It borrows it, with interest, from the Federal Reserve, which creates the money out of thin air. That means every time the government runs a deficit, the debt goes up, and guess who pays that debt? You, the taxpayer. Through inflation, through higher taxes, through endless interest payments, the U.S. government is in debt to a central bank it doesn't even control. And the American people are trapped in a financial matrix they never voted for. But the betrayal goes even deeper. In 1933, during the Great Depression, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102, forcing all Americans to hand over their gold to the federal government. Why? Because gold backed the value of the dollar. And for the Fed to expand its control over money, that gold standard had to go. The government paid you 20.67 an ounce for your gold. Then, a year later, it revalued gold to 35 an ounce, instantly devaluing the dollar and robbing the public. It was the greatest legal theft of private wealth in modern history, and it was all done to serve the needs of the Federal Reserve System. Fast forward to 1971. President Richard Nixon completely ends the gold standard. From that moment on, the U.S. dollar was no longer backed by anything. It became pure fiat currency, value based only on belief, managed solely by the Federal Reserve. And what happens when you give unelected bankers the power to print unlimited money? You get bubbles, you get crashes, you get recessions, and worst of all, you get a nation in endless debt. Let's talk about the 2008 financial collapse. It wasn't just a housing crisis. It was a coordinated implosion of trust engineered by banks that knew they were too big to fail. The Federal Reserve printed trillions in bailout funds. Not for the people, not for homeowners, but for the same financial institutions that caused the collapse. Wall Street got rich. Main Street got evicted. People lost homes, pensions, jobs. But the banks, they got bonuses. And what did the Fed do? It lowered interest rates, flooded the system with cheap money, and set us on course for the next crisis. Because that's the cycle they designed: boom, bust, bailout, repeat. Each crash wipes out the middle class and consolidates wealth, even further into the hands of a few. It's not incompetence, it's strategy. This isn't capitalism, it's cartel economics, a system where the winners are pre-selected, and the rest of us are collateral damage. And behind it all, the Fed keeps printing. Between 2020 and 2022, over 40% of all U.S. dollars in existence were created. That's not a typo. Nearly half of all circulating money was printed in just 2 years. And what followed? Massive inflation, skyrocketing rent, grocery prices doubled, wages stagnated, your dollars are worth less, your savings are evaporating, and the Fed blames supply chains and foreign conflicts. But the truth is, they created this, and they're not done. The next frontier: central bank digital currencies. A cashless system where every transaction can be tracked, monitored, even denied. The Federal Reserve has already begun exploring it. Under the name FedNow, they say it's for convenience. But what it really offers is control. Imagine a world where your money has an expiration date, where spending outside government-approved sectors is restricted, where dissent can be punished not by law, but by freezing your account. That's not speculation. That's the direction we're heading. And it all started with a deal on Jekyll Island. A deal made in secrecy, by men who never answered to the American people. A deal that handed your financial future to an invisible empire. This was the real betrayal. Not a war, not a conspiracy theory, but a legal, structural shift that rewired the DNA of American power, turning a free republic into a debt-slave economy. They sold your future. They sold your children's future. And they did it all with the stroke of a pen. It's time Americans knew. The truth was never hidden. It was buried, under technical jargon, media distractions, and patriotic myths. But now you know. Like this video if you believe America deserves a real economy, not one built on lies and debt. And subscribe to Ancient Light for more hidden truths from the past that still shape your life today. Because until we confront the betrayal, we'll never be free.